Well, it is 2026 now. That sounds funny. 2026. And I thought I would make the first video of this year. And it's not on one subject in particular, not one thing in particular, but a few things still generally related to the Christian life and God. But as opposed to all those Vlogmas videos I did, this is just going to be a normal sit down, talk to the camera type of video. And so the first thing that I wanted to talk about, and it's something that happened yesterday. Yesterday was Sunday, today's Monday. So yesterday I was in a church service, Sunday morning church service, and I was able to enjoy something, and that was to witness growth in others. And I found that very pleasant, very enjoyable to see. It was comparable to seeing a baby take its first steps. That type of excitement, that type of joy, that type of pleasant thing to witness, it was like that at church, at the church service. Yes, there was joy in seeing growth in fellow believers, and that is not always something that I have the privilege to witness, but I did yesterday, and it was a beautiful thing, a delightful thing. I was quite pleased with that. And again, I was reminded of how when God is able to move through his body, the church, through the different parts, and the different parts submit to him and obey, it's a beautiful thing. Very beautiful to see God able to move through, speak through, work through the different parts of the church body. And I found that when that happens, when that is allowed to happen, some of the most timely things are spoken or done. Edifying things happen. I won't go into detail about all the different things that did happen, but yes, there was the opportunity to hear from several different people, several different parts of the church body, not just one. And it was a beautiful thing. It was an edifying thing, and I appreciated it very much. Not to mention what I already said about being able to see growth, to see like baby steps happen with my fellow brothers and sisters. So what is my point in sharing this? That it is a wonderful, joyful thing to see growth, and to be able to witness, to have that privilege of seeing growth in fellow believers, as well as witnessing again the beauty that there is when God is able to move through his people, and not just the singular person, not just a singular person, but many parts. So yes, yesterday's church service was probably one of the best that I have been able to be a part of for a long time. The second thing I wanted to talk about is workhorses. Workhorses, how sometimes, depending on the situation, the timing, sometimes, let's see how I can put this, sometimes you are someone who gets to be fed more and sometimes you are the one who is helping to feed. And if you are the one who happens to be helping to feed more than the one being fed in any particular moment, that reminded me of a workhorse. What could I compare this to? Let's say there was a special event that was like being catered or something. And let's say there's this banquet room where all the tables and chairs are laid out, the place settings are laid out. This is where the special event is going to be. A lot of work had to happen before the guests can come in and sit down and enjoy a meal. A lot of planning, a lot of work had to take place before the guests come in, such as setting up the tables and chairs and setting out the place settings, preparing the food, all that type of planning and work before the guests come in to enjoy the meal. And sometimes God has you as the one that is doing all that prep work, working so that others can come and feed. And if you are that, if you recognize that you've been a workhorse, don't feel sorry for yourself. I mean, that's what I do. And be grateful that God is able to use you in that way. Because there are surely other times where I haven't been the workhorse, but I've been the one who can walk in, sit down, and partake in the meal without a whole lot of work put into it on my part. So it changes. Sometimes you're the one that partakes in the meal and is fed, and sometimes you're the one working so that others can be fed. I am not sure why I'm sharing that, other than it was something that I was thinking about, and I thought it might be helpful to you if you feel like the workhorse, to hear that is a reality at times, and it's okay to be that at times. I think it's a sign of growth that you're not always the one being bottle fed or spoon fed or served the meal. I think it's a sign of growth if you, at times at least, are the one helping to feed, helping to bottle feed, helping to spoon feed, helping to serve the meal. I would say it doesn't feel like the most glamorous position to be in. You know, sometimes I'd rather be the guest that can walk in and enjoy what was prepared, like at a special event. Sometimes I would like to be the guest that just walks in and enjoys what everybody else has worked at. And sometimes I am, and I sure appreciate when that's the case. There have definitely been times where I'm the one feeding, but other times, like I said, God is using you to serve and to serve others who need to be fed. All right, the next subject that I wanted to talk about is a thought that I had, and it is about that verse in the Bible. I will try to post it here on the screen. Something along the lines of that we should not forsake the assembling, as some do. Yes, so basically what I interpret that as is, don't, okay, first of all, this is what in general terms, this is what I think that is interpreted as, which is, don't stop going to church services. I think that's a fair general interpretation of that verse. Don't stop going to church. Now, what it means to me is don't neglect meeting with other believers in whatever setting that may happen to be. I don't interpret that as exactly don't stop going to church services at a designated church building. I just think it means don't give up meeting with other believers, whether that be at a church building or at someone's home or wherever. However, that is not the point that I'm getting at. I bring that up because I was thinking about that verse the other day, and I was thinking, why is that verse rather commonly mentioned? Out of all the verses in the Bible, I find that is fairly frequently mentioned. And why? Why? And the thought that I had was it will probably not be a very popular thought to share, but nevertheless, I think that it is pushed. That verse is so pushed, not for sheer loving obedience to God, but because people need to be manipulated to continue going to man's show of church that is so spiritually dry that most do not want to keep going to it. Is that unpopular? I don't really care. That's the thought that I had. Why is this verse rather commonly mentioned? And I know that I know that generally it's not meant to mean, oh, don't stop meeting with a handful of believers in someone's house. I know the drift is don't stop coming to church services. And as I just said, I think that verse is not pushed so much not only because of sheer loving obedience to what is given to us in the Bible, but to manipulate people to keep showing up to church services, which generally are so run by man that the result is it is so spiritually dry that people need to be manipulated to keep going to something that they don't really want to go to. I mean, I can think of many people in my life who may be a believer, but they definitely don't want to go to church services because it's, as I said, so spiritually dry. I'm not saying that's how gatherings of the church should be, but as I said, because it is so orchestrated and led by man, that is the result. When it's not led by the Lord and it's led by man, the result is that it's so spiritually dry, nobody really wants to go. And so that verse seems to be pushed so that people feel obligated to go to something that is so spiritually dry that they don't even want to show up. And furthermore, I think that verse is used so that the version of church services run by man and not by God, so that can continue. So that can continue. If you don't have customers, a business is not going to survive. So why not use that Bible verse to manipulate yourself some customers? Yes, and unfortunately, I think those who may be manipulated by that verse are being a little bit taken advantage of, because I think their heart is tender enough toward God that would influence them. That verse would influence a person with a tender heart to keep going to church services that are run by man. So I think That's a shame, to manipulate people that have a tender heart towards God in that manner. Now, again, I am not looking for popularity with this thought that I'm sharing with you, these thoughts that I'm sharing with you about why I think this verse is so frequently pushed, but it is what it is. I have even witnessed it, this verse being part of like some kind of oath or promise or covenant sort of thing that church members are supposed to like promise they will do when they join a church. Like some kind of oath. Like we won't forsake the gathering to get, basically they're promising we'll continue to attend this church. Yeah, it's used as some kind of part of the membership acceptance process. I thought that was interesting. Like, okay, why that specific verse? I mean, there's a lot of other verses we want to use as some kind of oath or like promise that new church members would be expected to adhere to, such as, I don't know, become more like Christ, love God, love others. Why that, like, maybe that would be a more lofty goal than we promise we'll continue coming to church services every Sunday now that we're members. Oh yeah, and that whole thing about being a church member and like having to go through some months long process of being an official member at a church, I don't quite agree with that personally. I mean, if you're a believer, at that moment you are a member of the church, the worldwide church of everybody who does believe in Jesus. That is what makes you part of the church, that you believe, not some months-long process of classes and now you're initiated or whatever into a church body. That's I know that is not how it goes all the time. Anyways, I just thought I would share my thoughts on that verse and why is it such a popular verse? And that is why that is why I think it is so popular, because it is used to control. That is why. And to perpetuate man using the church as a business. Do I agree with that verse? Sure. I'm not saying don't meet with other believers. I'm just trying to expand what that means and also shine some light on how it can be used to manipulate. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk about is respect. Generally, I'll start with that anyways. I'll say the next thing that I want to talk about is respect. And I won't get into detail about it. Okay, maybe I'll put a citation up on the screen somewhere. But I believe in the Bible there was something about wives respecting their husbands. Maybe you remember something along those lines. For wives to respect their husbands and for husbands to love their wives. All right, so I was minding my business. I was sitting in a church service one Sunday morning, minding my business, trying to pay attention to the sermon, sitting there listening to the sermon, and what did I hear? Nonsense is what I heard, if I may say so. if I may share my opinion, I was sitting there listening to the sermon and I heard nonsense. Okay, so what I heard was talking about the subject at the moment was about respect, about wives respecting their husbands. Okay, and what I heard that I thought was nonsense was that respect isn't earned. Respect is not earned. In other words, it is just something you do and give regardless. That is what I heard. That respect is not earned. It is something that you just do, you give regardless. Now, what do you think about that? What do you think about that? I thought it was nonsense. Like, who does that? Who does that? And okay, that was in the context of a husband and wife, but I mean, who does that even with, like, just generally? Who does that? You don't even do that to a washer and dryer. If a brand of washer and dryer is trash, then I will not respect that brand of washer and dryer. If something as humble as a can of tuna fish that you happen to buy at the store, you bring it home, you open it up, you eat it, and you're like, wow, this is garbage. This is some garbage tuna fish. Then my respect for that tuna fish, that brand of tuna fish, I will not have respect for that. I wouldn't, would you? I mean, what I'm trying to get across here is in the most basic, boring parts of life, respect is earned. Yes, I was sitting there listening to the sermon and I'm told that respect is not earned, and I thought, on what planet have you been living on? Because in almost every other area of life, respect is earned. Respect is earned. Do I need to give more examples of that? Well, what about like cars? Cars, I generally, I mean, I'm not an actual expert on cars or something, but generally it seems as if Toyota and Honda are respected brands because they over decades they have shown themselves to be good cars. And so they have some respect in a way. Do they not? Versus something else like, oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a lousy car. I don't know, a Fiat, or some car manufacturers that don't even exist anymore. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Respect is earned. And I'm just talking about cars and tuna fish and washers and dryers. And so I thought, wow. And this is from the pulpit. This is the amazing, insightful, wise, so-called truth that I get to enjoy listening to from the pulpit, where I don't think even unbelievers would accept that respect isn't earned. I think it is very much earned. Very much earned. And yes, when it comes to husbands too, it is very much earned. And if that wasn't bad enough, to say that respect is not earned, it is just something that you are required to give, if that wasn't bad enough, it was followed up with that it was directed to wives. This statement was directed to wives, and it was, if you don't give respect, don't expect love. And this is the wonderful truth, so to speak, that comes from the pulpit. And you wonder why. You wonder why that verse that I was talking about earlier, about we won't forsake the gathering together as some do, you wonder why that is so needed to be used. Well, maybe when this type of nonsense is preached, yeah, I need to be manipulated to keep going to listen to that. Yes, if you don't give respect, don't expect love. Okay, so I think, to me, that is nonsense. It should be both. It should be both. Not respect is earned, and there is love as well, on both sides. Respect and love on both sides. I didn't realize that was so complicated. Is it? It's not that complicated to me. And it made me question, does God think this? Does God think this? That respect isn't earned? And that if you don't give someone respect, that you should not expect love? Does God think that way? Does God demand this? And does he practice this himself? Does God practice this himself? I thought it was strangely ironic that earlier that Sunday we were going over that Bible verse about how, I will try to post the citation here somewhere, or perhaps the entire verse, but earlier that Sunday we were going over about giving double honor to, like, pastors who teach and preach well. Yeah, we had just thought it was so ironic. Earlier we were talking about that, about giving double honor to pastors who teach and preach well. And I thought, wow, well, we just talked about that. To me, that is illustrating to me that respect is earned. Why would you give double honor to a pastor who taught and preached well? You would give double honor to all of them then if respect isn't earned. Do you see what I'm saying? As a result of their teaching and preaching well, they are to be given double honor. I mean, I think, to me, that was connected a little bit. And also, what about that verse about God not really listening, I believe it was, not really listening that much anymore to the prayers of husbands who treat their wives poorly? What about that? Seems to me that God isn't even respecting that type of husband very much at that point, and yet respect isn't earned. Am I supposed to believe that? I don't. I believe respect is earned. And what I think it's a sad thing when, sad in a way. It's sad in a way when I find at times people who don't even know God to have more sense than those who are leaders, supposedly, in the church. Like, are you serious? Are you seriously telling me that respect is not earned, but it's demanded? that respect is not earned, but it is demanded. However, if you don't respect, don't expect love. It seems a little one-sided to me that respect is required, regardless of if the person merits respect. However, you are not to expect love, no matter if you're worth loving or not, apparently. Do you see how that's double-sided? Where respect is required in order for you to be loved. I think that's double-sided. Anyways, I thought this was almost not worth mentioning because it's so dumb, but I mean, this is what I hear preached from the pulpit, and so I'm just I'm just letting you know, be discerning of what you accept as truth, no matter where it's coming from. I don't care if someone claims to be a man of God. I will still want to discern if it is truth, if what they're saying is truth or not. I hope none of us are just eating up whatever we're told. In fact, lately, I thought I should have been doing it. Well, I have done it in my regular prayer time quite frequently. But lately, I've even been doing it right before I get to the Sunday morning church services. I will pray to the Lord to keep us from being deceived. And I am not talking merely about, Lord, please don't let us be deceived by what is out there in the world. No, I'm praying, Lord, please don't let us be deceived by what we might hear within the church. That's been a prayer recently. Lastly, I think it will be lastly, the last thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit related to that verse about giving double honor to pastors that preach and teach well. A little bit related to that. I guess I'll start by saying I think there should be less emphasis on money. Being paid for what you do, supposedly in obedience to the Lord. I think there should be less emphasis on that. I am not saying that nobody should be paid as a minister. I just think there should be less emphasis on it. And as I said in a past video, I can't recall exactly which one. It might have been the one about the importance of being critical. Anyway, I did mention in a past video when talking about pastors being paid. It's something that has crossed my mind to wonder if a pastor or anybody else in some type of ministry, it's a question that has crossed my mind. Would they be doing what they're doing if they were not paid? And if the answer is no, they would not be doing what they're doing if they weren't paid, then the next step is I would question if what they're doing is in true obedience to the Lord, and if God is really leading them to do that, whatever it is, to do that, whatever they're endeavoring in. If not being paid for that position means they wouldn't be doing it at all, then I would seriously question if God is involved in that. Because why? Maybe, possibly, it could be because of that verse about that we are to seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to us. I believe that. In other words, I actually believe that. So if a person is truly seeking first the kingdom of God, seeking first to follow the Lord and do His will, God will provide whatever is needed to them to live. And yes, I understand that it could be in keeping with that verse for that minister or pastor or whoever to be paid by the church or some organization of some kind. Yeah, that could be part of it too. I'm not saying it isn't. I am just desiring that that our eyes would be a little bit more focused on serving the Lord and doing what He wants us to do, whether money is involved or not, because God will supply what we need for living. Okay, anyway, that was a roundabout way to get to this topic that I'm about to talk about. So I was in a churchy situation. I found myself present in a churchy situation, and the topic was someone was talking about how the bigger the congregation is, the more the pastor should be paid. And so if the congregation is smaller, the pastor's pay should also be smaller. And okay, was that in the Bible somewhere? I don't know. Putting that part aside, okay, this is the conversation that is being had about if the congregation is bigger, then the pastor should be paid more, and if the congregation is smaller, the pastor's pay is also smaller. And some mention about if we were to increase the pastor's pay, that would be most welcome by the pastor. And somebody in the room commented on that, and I thought this person's comment was hilarious in more ways than one, probably because it was so to the point as well as funny. But in response to that, they said, well, then you got to bring them in, talking to the pastor. Well, if you want a raise, you should bring more people in then. So his comment was, well, you got to bring them in then. Yeah, if you want a raise based on what you just told us, I guess you have to bring more people in so that you get a raise, because then the congregation will be bigger, and then so will your pay be bigger. I thought that was very funny at the time that someone else's comment was, well, you got to bring them in then. I thought it was very sensible. Yeah, if that is the basis of how your salary is determined, that it is determined by or raised by a larger congregation, well, it follows then that more congregants should be brought in then if you want to raise. Okay, does that make sense? I hope I'm keeping it straight. So that was the comment. I thought it was funny that person said that. But I thought the pastor's response was a little interesting. So, okay, that was all laid out, and someone's comment was, well, you got to bring them in then. And then there was some laughter. And then the pastor's response to that comment was, the sheep bring the lambs in, not the shepherd. Responding to, well, you got to bring them in then, the pastor's response to that was, the sheep bring the lambs in, not the shepherd. Is that how it works? Is that how it works? Well, I guess all of the work then is on the shoulders of the sheep to bring more people into the congregation so that the pastor can get a raise in pay. Is that how it works? Interesting. Well, is that how I thought the shepherd has something to do with bringing in the sheep, bringing in the lambs, as they say. I thought the shepherd had something to do with that. Furthermore, are not pastors and leaders in the church and ministers, aren't they sheep also? At least before the Lord. They may be used as something of a shepherd, but generally speaking, are they not a sheep too? I just thought it was an interesting exchange. So does that mean that the sheep are to work to bring more people into the congregation and grow the congregation so that the pastor can enjoy a higher salary? I'm just saying, this is just a sampling, yet again, of why I think that verse about not forsaking the assembling together needs to be used so often, because if you stick around long enough, you hear a lot of things that would make you not want to assemble anymore. Yes, so that's all I had to share. Interestingly enough, what I talked about in terms of supposedly respect is not earned. The little bit I talked about where if you expect to be loved, you must give respect. That bit, as well as the bit about increases in the size of the congregation mean increases in pay, but the pastor doesn't have anything to do with bringing in more people. That's the responsibility of the sheep. That bit, yes, all of that. The less than savory parts that I was talking about, that was all in one Sunday. That's not like a year's worth of things I can gripe about that happen on a Sunday morning, in a Sunday morning church service situation. That is not a year's worth of things I could gripe about what is spoken in the church. That is from a single Sunday, just to give you an idea. However, despite that, as I began this video with, I have had the privilege of seeing beautiful baby steps from some people in the congregation. Despite the things that I'm griping about, by the grace of God, despite that, I have been able to have the privilege of observing baby steps. The beauty of that, the joy of that, of seeing growth in fellow believers. And that, I would say, is a significant reason for why I keep showing up at church services, is to somehow be a part of and to strengthen the good things that, by the grace of God, are happening despite all of the nonsense. I surely am not continuing to go to certain churchy type of meetings because I am being manipulated with that Bible verse. I'm going because there are purposes that God has for His people when we're gathered together in person. For His people. Purposes for His people when we're gathered together in person. Not to just sit down, shut up, and listen to one person all the time, but to hear from each other, edify each other. So, that is all I have to share and talk about in this video. It is starting to get dark. that is all I have to say for now. I hope you are doing well. And Lord willing, I will see you in the next video.